Hey guys, tonight we journey back to a time when winter wasn't just a season, it was a business plan. Picture yourself on the frozen edge of a New England pond, steam rising from your breath, the only sounds a distant saw's scrape, and the crunch of snow under worn leather boots. It's the 1800s, and believe it or not, that slick layer of ice underfoot, it's pure gold. Not the kind you can melt down into coins, but the kind you can cut, haul, and sell to the farthest corners of the British Empire. Yes, tonight you're an ice harvester. And no, you probably won't survive this career with all 10 toes. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, I'd love to know where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. Drop it in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It starts, as many peculiar things do, in America. In the early 19th century, a man named Frederick Tudor, soon to be dubbed the Ice King, got the odd idea that tropical colonies might enjoy a cube of frozen pond water in their lemonade. At first, everyone thought he was delusional. Ice on a ship? To India? And yet, in 1806, Tudor packed 130 tons of Massachusetts ice onto the favorite, bound for Martinique. It melted, yes, some of it, but not all. And that's all he needed to prove it could work. Soon, demand for ice exploded. From the palaces of Calcutta to the hotels of Havana, people wanted cold drinks, chilled desserts, and the bragging rights of frozen water in hot climates. Ice was no longer just nature's gift. It was a luxury commodity. This is where you come in. You're not a Tudor, of course. You're the guy standing ankle deep in snow at dawn, gripping a long tooth saw. Your hands ache before sunrise. You wear wool everything, and still, the cold claws in. The river's surface glitters in pale light. Time to cut. The work starts with scoring the ice. Teams mark a giant frozen field into a grid using plows pulled by horses, creating shallow grooves that guide the saws. Then come the hand cutters, like you. Each block is roughly 2 feet by 3 feet, weighing over 200 pounds. You saw 1, 2, 3 strokes, your teeth chatter in rhythm. The blade sticks, you jiggle it loose. One wrong move, and you could be joining that block in the frigid depths. And yes, people did fall in. Often. Not everyone climbed back out. Hypothermia was an invisible stalker. 1 minute you're humming to keep warm. The next, your body just forgets how to shiver. Still, the reward isn't bad. Ice pays better than many other working class gigs. In a good winter, you might bring in enough to feed your family for months. Of course, you'll also be too sore to lift your kids. As the industry grows, so does its quirkiness. In some towns, Ice Harvest Day becomes a spectacle. Ladies in bonnets sip tea on sleds while their husbands labor below. Children skate nearby, flinging snowballs perilously close to your saw line. One town even holds a contest to guess the exact day the last chunk of ice will melt in the storage pit. Victorian entertainment, folks. Historians still argue whether this craze was driven more by necessity or sheer novelty. After all, was it really practical to ship blocks of ice halfway across the world when a third melted en route? Or did people just want a taste of what was previously unthinkable? One curious tidbit: some ice was dyed blue on purpose. Not for safety, but because it looked cleaner to Victorian consumers. They didn't know about microbe science yet, but they did trust color coding. Honestly, same. As your day ends, you watch a team of horses drag the last load toward the ice house. Your fingers are raw. You still hear the saw's teeth in your dreams, but you did it. You helped capture winter in a box. And tomorrow, you'll do it again. Unless it snows. Then you'll be shoveling drifts just to find your grid lines. Fun times. Hereward count 1, 071 awaiting COTNUE, bean and I neen ETNE, chat GPT YNE. Section 2, you wake before the sun, and the cold has already found a way through your blankets. Your boots are stiff, your breath fogs the glass, and outside, the pond glimmers like sheet metal under the dawn sky. The ice won't cut itself, so you shuffle out to join the other men, half awake, half frozen, fully resigned. The worksite is a strange ballad of frost and fury. Horses snort steam into the air, their hooves thudding across the hard, packed snow. Nearby, the foreman marks today's grid, walking in long, even strides as if pacing a giant chessboard. His boots crunch with purpose. Yours crunch with regret. Your weapon of choice, the ice saw. It's long, heavy, and designed with teeth meaner than a dentist's worst nightmare. You and your partner start on a fresh row. He anchors the far end. You lower your side embrace. Your gloves are already wet. The rhythm is brutal. Saw forward, pull back. Saw forward, pull back. After the first few strokes, the friction starts to warm your arms, but not your soul. If poetry were pain, this would be a haiku. You say nothing, talking waste breath, and besides, your words would fog out and freeze mid-sentence anyway. It takes nearly 10 minutes to carve a single block loose. When the final tooth breaks through, there's a subtle pop, the ice surrendering. You and your partner lever it upward using iron tongs, clamping them over the edge and rocking gently until the block floats. It bobs there, thick and perfect, like a glistening tombstone. It won't stay floating for long. Someone on shore is already waving. It's time to get that block out before it decides to rejoin its watery ancestors. Most of the laborers are local farmhands, woodsmen, or fishermen. The harvest happens in deep winter. When other work slows down, you might be standing next to a man who milks cows in the summer, or another who builds barns. But here, today, you all wear the same coat of frost and exhaustion. The ice itself isn't always cooperative. Sometimes it's cloudy, too full of air bubbles. Sometimes it's brittle. And occasionally, you hit a frozen fish. That's right, nothing ruins your blade quite like the unexpected crunch of one very unfortunate perch. To speed things up, some companies use mechanized cutters, a rotating blade pulled by horses or early steam engines. It slices clean lines faster than any human, but the noise is awful, and there's a real chance it'll take a foot if you slip. You prefer the hand saw, even if your back doesn't. There's a dark side to all this industry. Injuries are common, and safety regulations are, let's say, optional. A misstep can land you in the water. The ice might hold you for a second, then it doesn't. Men disappear like bad dreams. Sometimes they're found days later. Other times never. Despite the risks, people come back year after year. There's something deeply satisfying about it. Maybe the way a clean cut feels when the blade hums just right, or the pride of seeing a towering pile of blocks at the end of the day. Or maybe it's just the pay. One historical gem during especially cold winters, towns declared unofficial holidays so families could come watch the harvest. Kids slid around the edges of the work zones while vendors sold roasted chestnuts and hot cider. Ice harvesting as a spectator sport. Only in the 1800s, historians still argue whether this early industrial labor movement helped lay the groundwork for modern worker unions. After all, here you were, freezing and fighting for basic wages and fair treatment, long before the big factory strikes of the 20th century. You were part of something raw and real. Before it had a name, you finish your row as the sun finally shows up. It's low in the sky, but bright enough to reflect harshly off every flat surface. Your eyes squint instinctively. You wipe your brow and leave a smear of frost. Another few hours, and the team will rotate, but for now you push on. You've got 10 fingers, 8 toes, and one very sore spine. That's a win in this business. As the last block slips free and floats toward shore, you take a moment. The pond is still again, save for the occasional creak or groan, ice shifting under the weight of industry. You stand there, saw in hand, not just cutting frozen water, but carving out your place in history. Quiet, invisible, and incredibly, incredibly cold. A word count 1048 awaiting CTNU BNNANE ChatGPT YNNI Section 3. As the morning frost thaws under your breath, the next ordeal begins. Cutting the ice was just step one. Now, the real muscle work kicks in, moving those massive, glassy blocks from pond to storage. Welcome to the hauler's dance, where horsepower meets pure, frostbitten grit. You stand at the edge of the frozen pond, eyeing a precarious wooden ramp sloping upward toward the shore. It's slicker than a buttered eel and just as unforgiving. Two horses, shaggy and strong, wait nearby, steam curling from their nostrils. They're the stars of this part of the operation, unless you count gravity, which is always waiting to make a surprise appearance. Using long iron hooks, you and a few other workers guide each floating ice block into position. One by one, they're nudged into narrow channels carved through the surface. Ice sluices, if you will, designed to funnel them toward the ramp. They're a simple conveyor system, sometimes just logs or greased wooden tracks, waits to take over. The trick is timing. You need the horses to pull with steady force, not too fast, not too slow. Too slow and the block freezes back into the pond. Too fast and it shatters halfway up the ramp. Or worse, slides backward, turning into a 200-pound hockey puck of doom. Today, you're assigned to the lead horse. Her name's Matilda. She's seen more winters than you and knows this routine better than most men. Her hooves thud into the snow. You tug the reins, coaxing her forward. The block grains, screeches, and finally starts moving, the path lined with men using wooden poles to guide it from the sides. Halfway up the ramp, you hold your breath. The block wobbles, tilts, then slides gently into place on the flabbed sled at the top. Success. Nobody cheers. Too cold for that. This sled, by the way, is no ordinary carriage. It's reinforced, wide, and designed to carry up to a ton of frozen weight. Horses are hitched in pairs, sometimes fours, depending on the load. As you secure the block, you notice your gloves are soaked through. Again, just another layer of discomfort to ignore. The route from pond to ice house isn't far, but every bump and turn threatens disaster. The ice must stay intact. Cracked blocks don't fetch the same price. So you move slowly, steadily, the sled creaking like it's got secrets. You march alongside it, pole in hand, ready to stabilize any shifting slabs. One curious tradition. Many teams carved small notches or symbols into their blocks. An early way of claiming credit and tracking output. Kind of like branding cattle, but frostier. Historians still debate whether this practice came from pride, necessity, or just a healthy sense of competition among crews. Of course, not all blocks make it. A mistimed corner, a shallow rut, and suddenly, bam, one slides off and shatters like a crystal vase. There's a groan from the crew, maybe a few whispered curses. The horses barely blink, they've seen worse. Some days, the snow is too deep and sleds bog down. Other times, it's too sunny and the ice starts to sweat, becoming slippery and heavy. You find yourself praying for just the right amount of cold. Not too brutal, not too mild. It's a fine line between productivity and frostbite. One particularly memorable mishap from the 1870s involved a hauler named Big Jim, who tried to speed things up by greasing the ramp with whale oil. Let's just say the blocks didn't stop at the top. They kept going. Through the storage barn. Into the chicken coop. No chickens were chilled in the end, but Jim earned a reputation. And a new job stacking hay. As you reach the ice house, you see workers already unloading. It's a ballad of tongs, pulleys, and grunts. Each block is lifted, stacked, and covered with sawdust to prevent melting and sticking. The floor shakes slightly under the weight. You unload yours, mark your tally, and stretch your back until it sounds like popcorn. Despite the monotony, there's a rhythm to it. A strange satisfaction. Each load you haul is one more step toward a paycheck, and a little slice of civilization that'll end up chilling oysters in London or lemonade in Cairo. You head back to the pond. Matilda trots beside you, her breath now steady. The sun's higher, the cold slightly softer. But your work is far from over. More blocks wait. Always more. And as you glance over your shoulder, you see it, a perfect row of glistening cubes, trailing up the ramp like frozen dominoes. You smile, just barely. Because in this world of ice, that's as close to art as you're gonna get. Her word count 1085 awaiting. See all and TINU. Being anyways. Con TINE ChatGPT. Ran section 4. By the time the last sled load of the day thuds to a stop outside the ice house, your body's aching in places you didn't know existed. But there's no rest yet. Now comes the most crucial part, storage. Because all that effort, all that sawing and hauling means nothing if the ice melts before it reaches a paying customer. The ice house itself looms like some great slumbering beast, massive, windowless, and silent. Inside, it's dark and smells faintly of sawdust and mildew. The air is still, cold, and dry. If you weren't hauling blocks into it, it might pass for a crypt. And in some ways, it is. This is where winter is buried, kept in suspended animation until summer screams for relief. The structure is ingenious in its simplicity. Thick wooden walls, layered with cork or packed sawdust, insulate the interior. Some more elaborate models have double roofs and drainage systems for meltwater. But even the basic versions can preserve ice for months, sometimes more than a year, if packed right. You and the team begin the stack. Each block is muscled into place with care. They're stacked close, but not too close. Airflow matters. Between each layer, a thick coating of sawdust is spread to act as insulation and prevent the blocks from fusing into one enormous, unmovable glacier. You shovel, toss, and pat down the sawdust until your sleeves are dusted like powdered donuts. An odd fact, the sawdust often came from nearby lumber mills. It was considered waste until the ice trade turned it into gold dust. Historians still argue whether the symbiosis between ice companies and sawmills was planned or just a happy accident born of Victorian thrift. Layer by layer, the stack grows, each block handled with reverence. You begin to feel more like a priest of preservation than a laborer. And in a way, you are. You're tending to a delicate treasure trove that the entire supply chain relies on staying solid. Some of the bigger companies use internal lifts or chutes to get ice to upper levels. You don't have that luxury. You have ropes, pulleys, and an aching spine. Blocks are hoisted, braced, swung, and wedged into tight corners by sheer force and a lot of shouting. And oh, the splinters. They say, no one leaves an ice house without at least 3 embedded wooden souvenirs. Yours are already accumulating under your nails. The supervisor walks through periodically, checking the walls for dampness, sniffing the air for the telltale sweet rot of melting. He scribbles in a leather-bound ledger. You don't know what he's writing, but you suspect it's not poetry. Back outside, you see snow beginning to fall, light and lazy, softening the edges of the world. You take a moment to breathe it in. There's a strange peace to the scene. The harsh labor, the thud of wood on wood, the clink of iron tongues, it all feels quieter under the falling flakes. But make no mistake, this job is not for the tender-hearted. You've heard tales of rival crews slipping fire, heated nails into the sawdust to ruin the next guy's stash, or sneaking in under cover of night to chip away another company's ice wall. Sabotaged by slush, it's not just cold, it's cutthroat. Your own stash, for now, seems safe. You pack the final block, sprinkle the sawdust, and step back to admire the work. It's a fortress of frost, a bulwark against the heat of the coming months. And you help build it. Quirky detail in some towns. Children were hired to help with the sawdust, both shoveling and sweeping. They called it dust duty. In the spring, these same kids might also get first pickings of any melt, puddled marbles, or coins lost in the rush. Victorian recycling, in its most opportunistic form. The sun dips low, and the shadows of the ice house stretch long across the snow. Your breath comes slower now. You're tired, but there's pride in your bones. This wasn't just labor. It was preservation, innovation, even a little bit of magic. You've bottled winter, and tucked it away like a secret to be revealed when the world grows too warm. You hang your tools on the wall, brush off the sawdust, and give Matilda an affectionate pat on the neck. She snorts, unimpressed. Horses are rarely sentimental. As you trudge home through the deepening snow, the ice house stands behind you, quiet and full. Tomorrow, you'll come back and do it again. Because somewhere, someone in a lace-trimmed parlor is already dreaming of a cold drink, and they have no idea what it took to make it happen. Our word count, 1 to 65 awaiting. CO Tianu Binan Bindai Katenu ChatGPT Oindanai Section 5. By now, you've seen the pawn sliced and stacked. Your muscles have cursed your life choices, and you've likely dreamed of ice blocks sliding eternally uphill. But here's where things get truly wild. Some of that very ice you wrestled from a sleepy New England river will soon travel thousands of miles, crossing oceans, melting mile by mile. Also, someone in the tropics can chill their punch. Welcome to the bizarre, wonderful world of 19th century global ice exports. It starts with packing. Once spring stirs and local ice sales dwindle, larger companies begin prepping their stockpiles for shipment. You're no longer moving blocks down a snowy path. You're helping load them onto wagons bound for ports. And from there, wooden schooners with names like Arctic Star or Glacier Bell take over. These ships are modified for insulation, double hulls, thick linings of sawdust and cork, and covered hatches to shield the cargo from sun and spray. You help heave block after block onto a waiting cart. Each one is lined with straw or padded with more sawdust, like it's a delicate artifact. And in some ways, it is. Ice is perishable cargo, absurdly so. Imagine shipping a birthday cake that melts if you look at it funny and weighs 300 pounds. That's what you're dealing with here. Once the wagons are full, you walk beside them to the dock, where dockhands, often former ice haulers themselves, stack the cargo into the ship's dark belly. It's claustrophobic, cold, and smells like old rope and damp wood. One false move and you're tumbling into a narrow space with walls made of frozen tombstones. As the ship departs, you watch it shrink into the horizon. That load might be bound for Charleston, Havana, or even Bombay. Incredibly, ice from Massachusetts was regularly shipped all the way to India. Sure, about 30% of it would melt en route, but the rest, delivered cool and intact. It was a marvel of Victorian logistics. And the profits, astronomical. That's what kept the business afloat. Pun very much intended. 1 ton of ice sold in Boston for pennies might fetch 10 times as much in Calcutta. You, of course, see none of that money. But your bosses, they start naming yachts after their daughters. One fringe fact, in Jamaica, Victorian doctors used imported ice to pack around feverish patients, believing it could literally freeze the illness out. Whether it helped is still up for debate. Historians still argue whether this was pioneering medicine or just colonial overconfidence with a chill. Once overseas, the blocks were sold to colonial clubs, hotels, and wealthy households. Local children would trail delivery carts through dusty streets, hoping for shards that broke off in transit. Sometimes they'd suck on them like candy. These were kids who had never seen snow, never felt frost, and yet, here they were, tasting your handiwork. It's odd to think that somewhere under a tropical sun, your breathless, half-frozen effort is melting into someone else's afternoon tea. The scale of it all is staggering. By the mid-1800s, Boston alone was exporting over 100,000 tons of ice annually. That's like shipping a glacier in pieces across the globe. And it wasn't just American lakes feeding this appetite. Norway got in on the act too, carving up its fjords and sending ice to England and France. In Australia, local papers reported the arrival of ice shipments like they were celebrity visits. The SS Sorbet has landed with 600 tons of Boston ice! One quirky invention. The insulated barrel. Before widespread refrigeration, people stored smaller quantities of imported ice in specially lined wooden barrels, then drew it out with ladles like some enchanted soup. Makes you look at your fridge's ice maker with a bit more reverence, doesn't it? Of course, every shipment had its risks. Sudden storms, warm currents, faulty insulation. Entire cargoes sometimes vanished into lukewarm slush. There's even a story about a captain who, realizing half his load had melted, Simply stopped in Bermuda, sold what was left at a markup, and claimed success. A real Victorian pivot? If you will. Your part in all this remains humble but essential. You don't sail the ships or dine in the clubs, but every block that travels across an ocean started with your saw, your strength, and your blisters. You're the invisible link in a frosty chain of extravagance. And as evening falls, you walk back from the docks, the scent of brine and tar fading behind you. Somewhere, on a ship bound for Singapore, your ice is already sweating in its straw bed. And maybe, just maybe, it'll make it. Okay, word count 1076, awaiting CONTNE, Bean Poon, ENE, ChanTINUE, ChatGPT, YNAE Section 6. By the time spring daffodils peek through the thawing earth, your part in the frozen chain has mostly ended. The pond's gone back to water, the ice house is sealed tight, and the horses are dreaming of greener fields. But the fruits of your labor, they're just beginning to sparkle in high society. Drawing rooms like glittering reminders that winter has been tamed. And served with lemon. You wouldn't believe how obsessed the Victorian elite become with ice. It isn't just a convenience. It's a status symbol, a chilly brag, a delicate slab of privilege nestled under a silver dome. If you thought all that shipping effort was just for drinking water, think again. You've entered the age of the ice, enhanced lifestyle. At one country estate, a hostess displays her wealth with a centerpiece of sculpted ice, shaped like a swan, complete with mint leaves frozen in the wings. At another, a London dinner party serves sorbet between courses, delicately spooned from bowls frosted so thoroughly they fog the monocles. And in the most prestigious homes, guests sip chilled champagne while their hands linger on their glasses just a bit longer, because cold fingers mean you're rich enough to waste ice. The most enviable piece of domestic hardware, the ice cream maker, hand-cranked, noisy, and often requiring 2 servants just to operate it. This contraption turns your pond's former surface into a dessert so cold it might as well be a miracle. It's the dish of choice at any fashionable gathering, often flavored with exotic ingredients like pistachio, saffron, or rose water. You'd be stunned how many people will fight over the last scoop of frozen custard at a garden FT. Quirky detail, Queen Victoria herself was said to be a fan of iced puddings. Elaborate confections that combined frozen fruit, cream, and intricate molds shaped like castles or pineapples. Historians still argue whether these desserts were genuinely tasty or more ornamental than edible, but either way, they were the Instagram bait of their day. Of course, ice also trickles into medicine. Upper crust households use it to soothe headaches, cool fevers, and even, in one case, preserve a deceased parrot until the taxidermist could arrive. Yes, really. Nothing says morning quite like a frosted cockatoo. In the bustling city of London, commercial ice vendors begin making deliveries by the block, pulling wagons through cobblestone streets and shouting, "Ice! Cold ice!" Housewives, armed with thick gloves and small chessels, buy enough to last a few days, storing it in basement boxes lined with zinc and straw. It's not just about freshness, it's about the future. Having ice means you've embraced modernity. You, of course, see none of this opulence firsthand. You might hear about it, maybe read a bit in the paper, if you squint at someone else's copy over breakfast. But mostly, you imagine it in flashes your ice, slowly melting beside a flute of elderflower cordial, or sitting beneath an oyster platter served by candlelight. The social rituals around cold grow absurdly detailed. Ice cubes must be symmetrical, clear, and in elite circles, silent. Clinking is considered vulgar. There's even a brief fashion trend of wearing tiny ice pins, brooches that concealed miniature frozen reservoirs to keep one's neckline cool during summer balls. The past, as ever, was weird. Meanwhile, in places like Paris and Milan, cafe culture adapts to the chill. Affluent patrons sip chilled coffees and try out iced waters, flavored with mint or lemon, and served in etched crystal. One French poet swears that ice heightens the senses and purifies the soul. He probably got that from the menu. Of course, this craze fuels a new industry: ice delivery. No longer confined to rural harvesters and dock workers, ice becomes a daily necessity for the urban upper crust. Entire careers spring up around managing ice logistics, and a good delivery boy in a fashionable district might earn more in tips than most laborers in a week. You shake your head, remembering the days you nearly lost a toe for the same blocks they now serve on silver trays. Still, it's hard not to feel a little pride, because you know the truth, that every chilled goblet, every spoonful of ice cream, every eyebrow raised compliment about how refreshing the cucumber water tastes, all of it began with a man on a pond sawing through frozen misery. You chuckle at the absurdity. You're not just an ice harvester. You're a hidden artisan of aristocratic coolness. As the sun sets over your small town, you sit on your stoop, sipping water drawn fresh from the well. No ice in your glass. But somewhere far off, in a chandelier-lit ballroom, a duchess raises hers, and without knowing it, toasts you. Her word count 1, Yodrify 9, awaiting ChatGPT. Section 7, you've chopped the ice, stacked it, and watched it sail away to far-off ports or melt into duchesses' teacups. But now, something strange is happening. Something you hadn't expected. Ice isn't just for the elite anymore. It's creeping into modest homes, rural kitchens, and even tenement flats. The era of the domestic icebox has arrived, and suddenly, Victorian families like yours are getting a taste of refrigeration, one chili cube at a time. It begins slowly. At first, only the wealthier middle-class homes invest in these curious wooden cabinets. They're about waist high, made of thick oak or walnut, and lined inside with tin or zinc. There's a compartment at the top where a chunk of ice sits like a frozen crown, radiating cold downward. Below that, perishable food rests in trays or wire shelves. Milk, butter, meat, anything you don't want turning into a biology experiment. When your neighbor gets one, everyone crowds around to see. Children gape at the cool air inside, pretending to faint from the novelty. Someone jokes about storing ghosts in there. But soon, more families follow suit. Even you start saving up, stashing a few coins from each week's pay. A year later, with the proud puff of your chest, you lug one home. And it changes everything. Gone are the days of salting meat to the point of dehydration. Your milk lasts more than a day. Cheese stops growing unexpected fur. Even leftovers become less terrifying. It's a quiet revolution, humming faintly beneath a slab of ice. Deliveries become a new rhythm of life. The iceman rings your bell. Every few days, hoisting a dripping block wrapped in burlap over his shoulder. He shuffles through the kitchen, sweating through his shirt even in winter, and lowers the ice into its chamber. If he's feeling generous, he'll chip off a small shard for the children to suck on. Instant celebrity status. Of course, not all iceboxes are created equal. The cheap ones leak, and sometimes food spoils anyway. But it's still better than nothing. Some clever households even add extra insulation using folded newspapers or layers of straw. Others fashion small fans to circulate the cold air, powered by hand cranks or simple clockwork mechanisms. Historians still argue whether these fan-based enhancements made any real difference, or were just a Victorian version of placebo cooling. A quirky practice emerges. People start naming their ice boxes. One neighbor calls his the Arctic Queen. Another paints snowflakes on the sides. There's even a local contest for best decorated cooling cabinet, won by a woman who glued crushed seashells to hers and dubbed it Neptune's Pantry. The prize? A free block of ice. But there's also an etiquette to ice ownership. You don't waste it. You don't leave the door open too long. And heaven forbid you put hot food in there. That's just asking for scandal. Your mother-in-law still mutters about the time someone did exactly that and killed the whole roast with steam. Maintenance, too, becomes a new chore. Every few days, you empty the drip pan beneath, a shallow metal tray that collects meltwater. If If you forget, it overflows and floods the kitchen. One week, your youngest decides it's a wading pool. The mop hasn't forgiven you since. Interestingly, the popularity of iceboxes even shifts how people shop. Markets now sell perishables in greater quantities, confident that customers can keep them cold. Recipes evolve. There's talk of iced salads and cold meat pies becoming fashionable. The whole idea of a summer menu expands, and the social implications enormous. Suddenly, a family with a well-stocked icebox is seen as upwardly mobile, even if they live modestly. It signals progress, hygiene, and a touch of modern sophistication. Invitations to dinner now come with cheeky footnotes like, "Serve chilled." You begin to notice new businesses cropping up. Ice delivery routes get formalized, with schedules and set fees. Stores start selling ice chips by the pound. A traveling salesman even offers a monthly subscription for premium crystal, clear blocks, free of pond scum. You're skeptical, but admit the idea of ice as a luxury good has staying power. Quirky tidbit: some newspapers start running weather forecasts, not just for temperature, for how quickly your ice might melt. Mild Tuesday expected, check your drip trays. The iceman, once seen as a rough laborer, now becomes a welcome figure. Children adore him. Housewives trust him. And while some men grumble about their wives chatting too long at the door, the truth is, he's a lifeline. Your family's food safety literally depends on his punctuality. By now, you're used to the sound of dripping in the background. It's become as familiar as the ticking of the clock or the creak of the front step. You no longer marvel at your icebox. You simply use it. And in that quiet shift, something remarkable has happened. You've moved forward, one block of ice at a time. Shea word count, €1.95 awaiting, COTINO, BNI, OTINO, ChatGPT 1NI. Section 8. The ice has changed your life in subtle but powerful ways, keeping food longer, adding comfort to summer days, even raising your social stock a few chilly degrees. But for the men who make all this possible, the harvesters, haulers, stackers, and deliverers, it's a different kind of story. One forged in aching joints, cracked skin, and the sharp reality that this job, like the ice itself, doesn't last forever. You've been doing this for years now. Your boots are soft at the heels, your gloves patched with odd bits of twine. When you bend down to lift a block, your back makes sounds that should probably be investigated by a priest. Still, the work calls to you, or maybe it just won't let go. Each season starts with the same hopeful promise: a good freeze, a strong yield, a few months of steady pay. But winter doesn't always listen. Some years the pond barely crusts over. Others, the snow comes so thick you spend more time clearing drifts than cutting ice. When it's cold enough, though, the work begins, and it never lets up. Your fingers, despite layers of wool, go numb in 10 minutes. You don't complain anymore. Neither does the guy next to you, whose ear turned white during a shift last year and now looks more like a lumpy mushroom than cartilage. Occupational hazard. The physical toll is intense. Your knees ache from hours squatting and lifting. Your shoulders burn from swinging hooks and saws. And your hands? They've formed into permanent claws that only seem to relax when gripping a cup of tea. Or better yet, a mug of something stronger. One man you know wraps his fingers in horsehair before each shift, claiming it wards off the freeze. It doesn't. Pay varies. If you're lucky enough to work for a large operation, you get a steady wage, a warm meal at noon, and maybe a cot in a bunkhouse nearby. Smaller crews often pay by the block. You do the math: if you and your partner cut 100 blocks in a day, you might clear a few shillings. Not terrible, but one injury, one broken saw, or one warm snap can erase that in an afternoon. Of course, there are risks. Ice cracks in unpredictable patterns. One moment you're balanced, the next you're slipping toward a gap that wasn't there 5 seconds ago. You keep a rope tied around your waist. So does everyone else. Doesn't always help, you've seen it happen. A misstep, a splash, a shout that disappears into echo. One winter, a boy no older than 16 fell through a weak patch. It took half a day to retrieve him. No one said much. Just stood a little farther from the edge for a while. And yet, here you all are again. There's camaraderie too. You and the others form a strange fraternity of frost. You share tools, swap stories, joke about whose beard holds the most icicles. One man swears his wife uses him as a coat rack when he gets home. Too stiff to move, she just hangs laundry on him. Occasionally, the workers strike. It's rare, but not unheard of. If wages drop too low, or the foreman starts skimming off the top, there's a mutiny. You've seen picket lines of frozen men holding hand, painted signs, snow swirling around them, shouting slogans with cracked lips. Historians still argue whether these early strikes helped pave the way for modern labor unions. It's hard to say, but there's power in shared suffering. And in ice, there's plenty of both. One quirky tale. A harvester once tried to sue his employer because the ice he cut didn't sparkle enough and sold for less. The judge dismissed it, but for weeks afterward, men would mock, complain about their dull diamonds. You still hear it now and then. When the season ends, it's bittersweet. You pack away your saw, fold up your rope, and walk past the now empty ice house. It smells faintly of pine and old frost. Some years you find another job, logging, fishing, whatever's available. Other years you scrape by until the ponds freeze again. But you always come back, despite the cold, the danger, the drudgery. Because this is a job with purpose. You're not just cutting frozen water. You're preserving a little bit of life, helping homes stay fresh, helping strangers feel comfort halfway across the world. You're a ghost in the background of 1,000 small luxuries. You may not have titles or medals, but you do have grit, wedged between your teeth, caked under your nails, stitched into your gloves. And that's worth something. Maybe not enough for retirement. Our word count 1097, awaiting Sonti Ayu Bien Mani Kotiini ChatGPT Omanani. Section 9. When the British Empire stretches its arms across continents, its reach isn't just marked by red on the map or train lines through deserts. It's also, oddly enough, marked by ice. Ice from your own pond. Your own aching hands. Ends up chilling cocktails beneath palm trees, lining hospital trays in colonial outposts, and clinking in glasses far too far from snow. Welcome to the Empire's best kept cool secret. It starts with British officers, used to the mild summers of Yorkshire or the damp drizzle of Surrey. They arrive in India, Egypt, or Australia and promptly melt. Literally, their uniforms designed with wool and bravado become personal saunas. And their solution? Ice, of course. As soon as the British realize their sunburnt limbs and tepid gin won't cut it, they begin importing massive blocks of ice to the colonies. At first, this seems absurd. How can you ship something that melts across the globe? But Frederick Tudor, the Ice King, we met earlier, had already proven it could be done. By the 1840s, regular shipments of ice from New England to Calcutta, Bombay, and Madras are part of an actual schedule. You're amazed when you hear about it, blocks of pond ice from Massachusetts, packed in sawdust, slowly sweating their way around the Cape of Good Hope to the tropical heart of the empire. It sounds like madness, and it kinda is. But it works. In Calcutta, the arrival of an ice ship is met with fanfare. Crowds gather, ox carts rumble down dirt roads carrying blocks wrapped like holy relics, and the British elite toast the arrival with glasses chilled to perfection. One officer claims that his morale tripled with the delivery of ice. Another reportedly dunked his entire head in a barrel of meltwater just for the thrill. What the colonizers call comfort, the locals often call confusing. Ice, to people who've never seen snow, is more than rare. It's mythical. Children in Madras line up just to touch it. In Cairo, a servant is rumored to have run screaming when handed a block, convinced it was cursed. And in Sydney, ice is displayed in shops as if it were jewelry, with crowds marveling at its clarity. Historians still argue whether the ice trade genuinely improved life in the colonies or simply served as another symbol of British dominance, an assertion that even nature itself could be conquered, boxed, and shipped at will. There's probably truth in both. Interestingly, ice isn't just for parties and parlor games. Colonial hospitals quickly become heavy users. Ice is used to lower fevers, soothe infected wounds, and keep certain medicines from turning into soup. In the sweltering wards of Rangoon or Nairobi, a well-timed ice pack can be the difference between life and death, or at least between fainting and slightly less fainting. But the logistics, nightmare fuel. Storage is tricky. Dedicated ice houses are built in places like Bombay, structures with thick mud, brick walls, double ceilings, and layers of straw insulation. Still, in peak heat, losses are huge. One report claims up to 70% of imported ice melted before it could be used. Your jaw drops when you hear that. 70%? That's not just waste. It's practically an offering to the sun god. The solution? Local ice harvesting.
Yes, really.
Some colonial outposts try to create their own supply by harvesting from nearby mountains or even experimenting with early artificial ice making techniques. But nothing beats the clarity and consistency of your good old New England frozen lake slabs. In fact, your own village's pond earns a kind of fame. You hear from a passing trader that blocks labeled Concord Lake ice are fetching high prices in Singapore. You laugh. Last time you stood on that lake, you nearly lost a boot in a slush hole. There's even talk of branding. One company stamps its blocks with a logo burned into the ice, visible only when held up to the light. It becomes a sign of quality, almost like a vintage wine label. You wonder if the future holds artisan ice tastings. Spoiler, yes, it kind of does. Meanwhile, back home, the colony's appetite for ice boosts your industry. Wages tick upward, new jobs open, and suddenly, even your town has a few more shops, a better road, maybe a new post office. The global thirst for chill brings unexpected warmth to your life, but still, you wonder. All that effort, all that melt, all those miles, just to cool a drink or drop a fever a few degrees. Is it worth it? Then you remember the boy in Calcutta, eyes wide as he touches snow for the first time. The patient in Nairobi who sleeps easier with a cloth soaked in ice water. The quiet ripple your work makes halfway around the world. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough. Our word count 110A4 awaiting CLTIU Bienpun INIXNIATNE Chat GPT YNI. Section 10, you've sawn it, stacked it, stored it, and shipped it. But have you ever taken a good look at the tools that make it all possible? The odd, wonderful, sometimes terrifying gadgets of the Victorian ice trade. Tonight, you're going to get to know your toolkit, and trust me, it's stranger than you think. Let's start with the basics. The most iconic item in your arsenal is the ice saw. Long, toothed like a dragon's grin, and heavier than it needs to be. Some are as tall as a man, with wooden grips polished smooth from years of use. The blades are brutal, designed not for finesse but for efficiency. Cut, grunt, repeat. Every man has his favorite saw, often passed down or modified with a quirky handle or initials burned into the shaft. Some guys sharpen theirs obsessively, claiming they sing sweeter that way. Maybe it's true, or maybe they've just gone mildly frost mad. Then you've got ice plows. Coarse, drawn contraptions that look like metal torture devices. These score the surface of the ice into a grid before cutting begins. One wrong bump, and the whole pattern's off, which means someone's redoing it with a hand chisel while muttering dark poetry. Under their breath, next comes the breaking bar, a sort of heavyweight crowbar used to lever blocks free once they've been cut. You know that satisfying pop when the block releases. That's the bar doing its job. You love that sound. It means progress. But by far, the strangest looking tools are the ice tongs, not the cute kind you use at a dinner party, but massive iron claws that could pass for crab pincers forged by Hephaestus. You swing them over a block, snap the jaws shut with a thunk, and lift. The good ones grip like a vice. The bad ones slip when you least expect it, usually when your toes are in range. In winter, every man is issued a set. They get nicknames. Yours are Snappy and Bitey. They've both betrayed you at least once. You also carry a chisel, shaped more like a wedge, used for detailed shaping or rescuing blocks that didn't break cleanly. Some fellows modify theirs, adding grooves or notches. One guy even tied bells to his, said it helped him find it in the snow. It also made him sound like a very sad elf. Now let's talk about the real curiosities. Ever seen an ice creeper? It's a set of spiked sandals strapped to your boots to help you grip the ice. They work, mostly, until the straps loosen and you end up face first in a snowbank with your pride leaking out your ears. Another bizarre item. The ice scoring compass. Not for maps, but for perfectly marking round cuts, often used when companies wanted to show off by delivering circular blocks. Nobody liked those. They were harder to stack and made shipping crews swear in 5 languages. One man, a self-proclaimed ice whisperer, invented a kind of glove heater, basically a pouch of hot coals wrapped in metal mesh that hung from his belt. Theoretically, you could warm your hands over it. In practice, he set himself on fire. Twice. Historians still debate whether he was a visionary or just very stubborn. And let's not forget the measuring rod, marked in inches, and feet used to check the thickness of the ice. If it read less than 8 inches, you went home. If it read 7, some bold soul might still walk on it, just to be sure. This was often followed by the unmistakable sound of someone learning about hypothermia the hard way. The design of these tools evolved over time, but not as much as you'd expect. A saw from 1820 doesn't look wildly different from one in 1880. Function, not form, ruled here. Beauty wasn't the goal, survival was. Though some blacksmiths got fancy, engraving tongues or crafting monogrammed handles. Occasionally, tools were passed down like heirlooms. This here saw cut ice for my granddad's honeymoon supper. Someone might boast, holding up a blade that's more rust than steel. One odd facty, some tools were dual purpose. A plow handle might double as a stretcher. A bar might have notches for hooking gear. The more flexible the tool, the more likely it was to be kept when packs were light. Historians still argue whether the simplicity of ice tools was a sign of backwardness or brilliant minimalism. After all, these gadgets conquered one of nature's most ephemeral elements with no motors, no electricity. Just leverage teeth and a bit of ingenuity. You look at your own kit now, hung neatly on hooks in the shed. Each piece is worn, scarred, but trustworthy. You know their weights by heart, the way they feel when you grip them blind in the dark. They're not just tools, they're partners. And tomorrow you'll carry them again. Because even if machines come knocking one day, they'll never quite replace the sharp bite of Snappy and Bitey, or the satisfaction of a saw singing across the ice at dawn. Him word count 10A1 awaiting Ciontiinu Bininan Ion Ti Chachi Pty. Section 11 Winter is supposed to be your ally. The season of frozen bounty, firm footing, and crisp air that slices through your nostrils like cold needles. But every ice harvester knows that nature, though generous in frost, can also be fickle. And when she decides to warm up early, or skips the freeze altogether, things get slushy. The first time you face a short ice year, you think it's just bad luck. The pond, instead of glazing over by December, stays stubbornly liquid. You stand on the shore, hands on hips, watching ducks paddle where your blocks should be forming. By January, there's a sheen, but it's thin, barely enough to skip a stone on. The ice house echoes empty. The foreman starts pacing. This isn't just inconvenient. It's catastrophic. Without thick ice, the entire chain collapses. No sawing, no hauling, no deliveries. That means no pay. And when the ice finally does come, it's often weak, riddled with air pockets and dangerous to cut. You and your crew try anyway, wobbling on the surface like ducks yourselves, tapping cautiously with poles before each step. Even when you get a harvest, The blocks are thinner, more fragile. They break during transport. They melt faster in storage. You work twice as hard for half the yield. One day you spend hours scraping slush into shapes that barely pass as cubes. It's humiliating. Some years, ice has to be shipped to your region just to meet local demand. Imagine that. You, a seasoned harvester, watching someone else's blocks roll in by train. Thicker, clearer, better. It stings worse than windburn. This is when the real tension sets in. Tempers flare. Men argue over who gets the limited work. Some stretch the truth about thickness, dragging unready blocks just to hit quotas. One guy saws too far out, falls in, and needs 3 men to fish him out with tongs. He shivers beside the fire all day, muttering that the lake is laughing at him. And maybe it is. In times like these, innovation tries to plug the gap. Some clever tinkerer sets up an early cooling shed, using saltpeter and evaporative techniques to make artificial cold. It sort of works for small quantities, but it smells awful, and the results aren't clear ice, just slush packed into molds. Historians still argue whether these early refrigeration experiments were truly the first step toward modern cooling, or desperate flailing in a thawed out panic. You also see desperate men try night scraping, going out just before dawn to skim any overnight freeze and rush it into storage. It's not real ice, not like the thick slabs you're used to, but it'll chill a ham if you stack enough of it, barely. One guy calls it ghost ice. You call it pathetic. And yet you join in, because there are mouths to feed and no real alternatives. Your hands blister anew from scraping instead of sawing. You develop an eye for slush thickness, measuring with your toe rather than a rod. It's undignified, but it's work. A quirky custom arises during these bad years, the first cracked toast. The moment a solid layer finally forms and someone gets a clean split, the whole crew gathers for a tin cup of something strong. You lift your mug, grin, and say, "To stubborn water?" It's half tradition, half exorcism. Meanwhile, customers grow impatient. Ice prices spike. Local papers run gloomy editorials about spoiled food, drooping flowers, and melting desserts. One satirical cartoon shows a man fanning his butter while crying into a bowl of warm custard. You laugh a little. Then you stop because your own butter's soft too, and rivalries get sharper. Ice crews from neighboring towns poach your pond at night. You find mysterious grooves cut into your territory. Saw lines you didn't make. Someone's been skimming your stash. There's talk of guarding the lake with dogs. One man installs bells on his dock. You start sleeping with your boots on, just in case. This isn't just weather, it's war. And yet, through it all, you keep going. Because that's what you do. You read the skies, sniff the air, test the pond with a pole and prayer. When the frost finally hits right, you're there before dawn, sliding out with your tools, ready to make up for lost time. You know nature doesn't owe you anything, but you've earned at least one good freeze. And when it comes, oh, the satisfaction. The crack of thick ice under your saw. The satisfying lift of a dense, square block. The look on your crew's faces when the sled's finally full again. It's enough to make you forgive the pond for its moody seasons. Well, almost. Her word count 1077, awaiting, COTI ni U, Bean, Ini, Sata Iniwi Chat GPT Wainenwai Section 12, the world of Victorian ice harvesting, despite all its clinking refinement and frosty dignity, isn't all prim and proper. Beneath the surface, right under that sheen of polite society, you discover something colder than the ice itself: turf, wars, sabotage, and a surprisingly heated rivalry between the men who sell frozen water. Welcome to the back alleys and backstabbing of the ice dealers' Cold War. By now, your role has changed a little. You're not just sawing and stacking, you're delivering, or maybe managing a local route. The ice trade's booming, and every neighborhood wants their own dealer. It's a little like being a milkman, but with heavier goods and 10 times the drama. Each dealer claims a patch. This street, that block, those few houses with the big porches and generous tips. You memorize faces and back doors. The Iceman doesn't need a map. He knows his city by the sound of screen doors creaking open and children calling from windows. But as more men enter the game, the lines blur. One day, you show up to Mrs. Pennington's with her regular half block of icy, and she waves you off. Already got some this morning, she says sweetly. A younger fellow, taller, nicer apron. You grit your teeth. That's your apron aesthetic. You start seeing signs. Ice blocks delivered without your marking. Drip trails on streets you don't serve. Flyers in mailboxes promising colder, clearer, cheaper. Ice from someone you've never heard of. Your heart rate rises, and not from exertion. You ask around, a few whispers, some laughs. Apparently, a rival crew has started offering morning specials, undercutting prices, and tossing in free chips for kids. It's charming, until it takes food off your table. You retaliate, wake up earlier, offer double chips, bring a dog. Mrs. Pennington swoons. Soon, it's more than competition. It's sabotage. You find one of your ice blocks knocked into the street, shattered. Another day, your tongs are missing. A third, your sled's ropes are mysteriously cut. You don't want to make accusations, but let's just say you have a very specific suspect in a very specific cap with a very punchable face. There's even an incident with dyed ice. Someone, maybe you, maybe not, adds a little blue tint to their delivery blocks. Customers love it. Looks fresher, they say. It's harmless until a competing crew claims your ice is tainted with chemicals and starts offering free tastings of their pure mountain blend. It's all melted pond water, of course, but marketing makes miracles. Historians still argue whether these street-level turf skirmishes between icemen were early signs of modern brand warfare, or just what happens when too many strong backs and sore egos collide in a sweaty city grid. Either way, it gets wild. One urban legend. A dealer named Icebox Charlie used to ride with a hidden slingshot, launching pebbles at rival wagons as he passed them on the street. You don't know if it's true. But you have seen some suspiciously dented hats. Some neighborhoods take sides. You're known. Trusted children cheer when your wagon rounds the corner. Others jeer. A woman once pretended not to be home just to avoid the confrontation. The block was tense that summer. Felt like a chilly Hatfield and McCoy situation, with ice chips instead of bullets. But it's not all pettiness. There's danger too. One evening, your friend Thomas is hauling a load through a narrow alley when a rival crew accidentally spills water ahead of him. His horse slips. The wagon tips. Thomas breaks his arm and loses half the load. No charges are filed. Just a lot of muttering and a mysteriously slashed tire on someone's cart the next morning. And yet you keep at it. Because this job, this life, it matters. It's not just about cold drinks or chilled custards. It's about identity. You're the Iceman. You bring relief. You're remembered by name. No one throws a party for a chimney sweep, but when you deliver a clean block on a hot day, you're a hero. A quirky bit of ice war etiquette. If two icemen meet on the same doorstep, they must offer their blocks for comparison. Whichever one's clearer wins the sale. It's a strange sort of duel. No swords, just frozen proof. You've never lost, probably. Eventually, some cities start regulating routes to avoid fights. Permits, boundaries, rotation schedules, it helps a bit. But the spirit of rivalry never melts completely. At night, you sit with a sore back and a melted apron, counting the day's coins. Some days you win, others not so much. But you sleep proud because you're still out there. Still serving, still colder than the competition. Hairword count 1079 awaiting COTIU Binalinai Kanatayani ChatGPT Alanenai. Section 13 there's a sound in your neighbor's house. A low hum, steady, unnatural. At first, you think it's a wasp trapped behind a wall, or maybe a pipe vibrating in protest. But it's neither. You go over one evening to borrow a bucket and catch a glimpse of it in the corner of the kitchen, a tall metal box, glinting faintly under the oil lamp. Refrigerator, he says, grinning. Runs on electricity. Your world shifts. At first, it's hard to believe. A box that makes its own cold. Without sawdust, without drip trays, without you. You stand there, in silence. One hand still outstretched for that bucket. As your neighbor opens the door and reveals a soft glow and a shelf of perfect, dry, frost-lined coolness. No ice block in sight. You walk home slower than usual. The first mechanical refrigerators are expensive, of course. So expensive that only businesses and the very rich can afford them. But word spreads fast. Within a year, the local butcher replaces his entire back room with humming metal boxes. Then the chemist. Then the cafe where you used to deliver ice each Friday morning. One by one, your customers disappear like blocks in the sun. There's a growing sound on the streets. Not the clink of tongs or the creak of carts, but the whir and buzz of motors behind walls. It's progress. It's terrifying. You try not to panic. You tell yourself it's a fad. You remind your crew that these machines break, that they cost too much, that they can't match the simple efficiency of pond ice and sawdust. Historians still argue whether this early skepticism from workers like you is short-sighted or simply practical. Probably a little of both. You tighten your delivery routes. You add polish to your blocks. You offer loyalty discounts. You paint a slogan on the side of your cart, real ice. Real cold, real fast. But it's like patching a leak in a dam with your thumb. One quirky moment, a local newspaper runs a taste test between machine, cooled drinks and natural ice, cooled ones. The difference? None. Except the machine drinks were colder, much colder. The article ends with a cartoon of an iceman weeping into a melting block. You don't clip it. Worse yet, the machines don't just threaten your sales, they threaten your identity. You've spent years mastering this trade. Your muscles are shaped by it. Your story's soaked in it. And now, you're being phased out by a box. The machines grow smaller, more affordable. By the 1910s, a few families in your own neighborhood have them. Their icemen stop by less often than not at all. You overhear conversations about refrigeration upkeep and motor coils, as if these folks have joined a club you're not invited to. Some men in your crew jump ship early. They apply for jobs at electric companies or try to learn how these machines work. One even starts installing them. Trader. You consider it, but something in you can't quite let go of the ice. The foreman tries to diversify. Offers seasonal services. Lawn care in summer. Snow shoveling in winter. Someone jokes about opening a lemonade stand just to keep using ice. You don't laugh. Then come the warehouses. Massive, machine-cooled distribution centers that dwarf your old ice house. Their walls don't groan in heat, they hum. Consistent, controlled, and indifferent. You walk past one and realize it smells like nothing. No sawdust. No wet hay. No winter. Just cold. A few stubborn customers stick around. Nothing like real ice, they say. But each year there are fewer. The drip trays stay dry. The sawdust stays bagged. You hold out for a while. Longer than most. But eventually, the icebox deliveries taper. Your rote shrinks. One morning you wake up and realize you have no one to deliver to. You return to the shed, where Snappy and Bitey, your faithful tongues, hang on their hooks. You run your hand over the saw's teeth. Still sharp. Still ready. But there's no more ice to cut. And the worst part? You can't even be angry. Not really. The machines work. They're efficient, clean, modern. What used to take 30 men now takes one circuit board and a whisper of Freon. Still, it's hard not to feel bitter. Not because the work was easy, but because you were good at it. And now, that doesn't matter. You sit by the pond one last time, boots crossed, cap pulled low. The water laps gently, reflecting clouds that don't care whether they're mirrored by ice or metal. You sigh. You hear a buzz in the distance. Refrigeration has arrived. Word count 1EO760 awaiting Kanti Ainu. B9 Nazakayan ChatGPT 1E9 section 14 you sell the horse first. Matilda, old and steady, is carted off by a neighbor with a new plow rote. You don't watch her go. but you feel the empty space she leaves behind every time you walk past the stable. The saw is next, snappy and bitey too. A young man, starting a curiosity shop, offers you more than they're worth. Rustic artifacts, he calls them. You wrap the tools carefully, like you're saying goodbye to pieces of your own history. By now, it's clear the career of the ice harvester has melted. Your days grow quieter. There's no more waking before dawn to check pond thickness. No more aching shoulders from lifting blocks. No more slipping tongues or snapped ropes, or the joy of seeing a perfect cut float free. Just the occasional chill wind rattling the windows and a memory you can't quite shake. Some of your crew have moved on. One runs a hardware store. Another joined the electric company. A few stuck with delivery until it dried up completely. Most don't talk much about the old days. Too many splinters under the skin. You try a few things. Helping at the train station. Odd jobs on local farms. Someone suggests you sell firewood. Still natural. Still heavy. They joke. But chopping wood doesn't bring the same satisfaction. It doesn't echo across the water. Doesn't pop like ice when it breaks just right. Sometimes you sit with neighbors and share stories. They ask about the ships to India, the time the saw blade snapped mid-cut, or that year the ice was so clear you could see fish frozen mid-swim. You talk, but gently, like unwrapping something fragile. You don't want to make it sound too romantic. It wasn't. It was cold, hard, and half the time you wanted to quit. But it was yours. A quirky turn of events a local school asks you to speak. Living history. They say, you stand in front of 30 kids who've never touched a block of real ice unless it came from a tray. You bring photos. A broken pair of creepers. The measuring rod with the notches still visible. Their eyes go wide when you describe the horses, the saws, the meltwater running down your boots. You finish your story with the same line every time. We didn't make the ice. We just listened for the moment it was ready to let go. Some weeks, you visit the pond. It's quiet now. No grooves, no planks laid across its surface. Just reeds and ducks. And the occasional boot print from a curious child. You tap the surface with your stick. Not for any reason. Just habit. You think about how much has changed. About how something once so essential, so prized, could vanish without anyone really noticing. One day you're part of the lifeblood of society, and the next, a whisper of it. Historians still argue whether this shift was a tragedy of progress or simply a natural turning of the seasons. Maybe it's both. You start keeping a journal, just a small notebook, pages smudged from your thumb, stories of the trade, sketches of tools, names of crewmen now gone. It's not for fame or books or museums. It's just so you don't forget. So, when someone someday wants to know what it was like to shape winter, with your bare hands you'll have something to offer, and you do make peace with it, slowly, because time moves, seasons turn. The pond still freezes, even if no one cuts it anymore. Snow still falls, even if no one shovels it for sled runners. And the cold, well, the cold doesn't care who carries it. You do miss the sound of the saw, the way it groaned and sang and chewed through time. You miss the camaraderie, the ice house smell, even the terrible coffee drunk from tin mugs with frozen lips. But most of all, you miss the feeling of knowing exactly what you were meant to do. One morning, your granddaughter visits. She opens the fridge, pulls out ice for her juice, and laughs. Imagine life without this. You smile. Not because you're sad, but because you did. You lived it.